Before we witness the moment when Senator Lindsey Graham learned that attacking someone who has evidence of your crimes only accelerates your own destruction, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because what you are about to witness demonstrates how decades of corruption can unravel in a single devastating legal response that would change American politics forever. The Senate Armed Services Committee hearing on defense contractor oversight had been proceeding for nearly 2 hours on a sweltering July afternoon that had the Capitol's air conditioning working overtime, with the temperature outside reaching 97 degrees and the humidity making it feel even worse. The committee room was packed beyond capacity, staffers lining the walls, reporters crammed into every available space, and an overflow crowd watching on monitors in adjacent rooms. The hearing had been called in response to a Government Accountability Office report suggesting that defense contractors had overcharged the Pentagon by at least $200 billion over the past decade, though everyone knew the real number was likely much higher. Lindsey Graham had been in his element from the moment the hearing began, using his position as a senior committee member and his 20 years of Senate experience to deflect every attempt at serious oversight of military procurement fraud. He had been particularly dismissive of witnesses who suggested defense contractors were systematically defrauding taxpayers, using his trademark combination of Southern folksiness and senatorial authority to make critics seem unpatriotic for questioning military spending during what he called dangerous times for America. He would lean back in his chair with theatrical exasperation whenever someone presented evidence of overcharging, roll his eyes at mentions of accountability, and interrupt testimony with long speeches about supporting the troops that had nothing to do with the actual subject of contractor fraud. The mood in the room had been tense from the beginning, with progressive members of the committee pushing for real investigation, while establishment senators from both parties seemed more interested in protecting the status quo. Graham had been the unofficial leader of the Protection Brigade, coordinating with other senators to limit witness testimony, restrict document requests, and generally ensure that the hearing would produce no meaningful action. He had already succeeded in blocking 3 amendments that would have required more stringent auditing of defense contracts using procedural maneuvers and backroom deals to maintain the system that had operated without real oversight for decades. When Congresswoman Jazmie Crockerr was announced as an expert witness to present evidence of systematic procurement fraud costing taxpayers hundreds of billions, Graham's entire demeanor shifted from casually dismissive to actively hostile. He had clearly been briefed on Crocker's reputation for meticulous preparation and devastating revelations, and he immediately began trying to limit her testimony through procedural objections. He argued that she lacked the security clearance to discuss defense matters, that her time should be limited to 5 minutes instead of the agreed-upon 30, and that her documents should be reviewed by the Pentagon before being entered into the record. Each objection was overruled, making Graham increasingly agitated. When Crockerr finally began her presentation, it was clear she had come prepared for war. She had boxes of documents, each carefully organized and tabbed, multiple laptops with encrypted drives containing evidence, and a team of aides who helped her display information on the hearing room screens with military precision. She began methodically presenting documentation of price gouging that defied comprehension. Simple bolts that cost $50 at a hardware store being sold to the military for $300. Standard laptops available commercially for $800 being sold to the Pentagon for $15,000. Basic rifles that cost $600 to manufacture being sold for $12,000 each. But Crockerr went beyond just price comparisons. She showed how defense contractors had created elaborate schemes to justify their overcharging, including fake research and development costs for items that had been in production for decades, maintenance contracts for equipment that was designed to break, and replacement parts that were deliberately made incompatible with previous versions to force complete system overhauls. She presented emails between contractor executives joking about how easy it was to rob the Pentagon, one executive writing, "These idiots would pay $1 million for a hammer if we told them it was tactical." Graham attempted to interrupt multiple times during Crocker's presentation, but the committee chairman, who seemed genuinely shocked by the evidence being presented, overruled him each time. Graham's frustration was visible and growing. He was fidgeting in his seat, repeatedly loosening his tie, drinking glass after glass of water, and whispering frantically to his aides, who seemed unable to provide him with effective counterarguments to Crocker's meticulously documented evidence. His usual tactics of deflection and patriotic grandstanding were useless against the avalanche of facts being presented. The breaking point came when Crockerr began discussing specific defense contractors who had been overcharging for basic equipment while delivering products that didn't meet specifications, products that were literally getting American service members killed in combat zones. She showed classified reports, which she had obtained proper clearance to present, documenting how body armor that was supposed to protect against high-caliber rounds would fail under basic testing, how vehicle armor that was rated for IED protection had gaps insurgents had learned to exploit, and how communications equipment had been compromised with foreign-made components that created security vulnerabilities. She presented the case of Blackwater Defense Systems, a major contractor that had received over $40 billion in contracts over the past decade. The company had claimed their revolutionary new body armor system would provide unprecedented protection for American troops, justifying a price tag of $5,000 per unit when similar protection could be purchased commercially for $800. But internal company documents obtained through a whistleblower showed that executives knew the armor was defective before it was ever shipped. They had falsified test results, bribed inspectors, and covered up failures that had resulted in at least 47 American deaths and hundreds of injuries. Graham suddenly slammed his hand on the desk, the sound echoing through the chamber like a gunshot, causing several people to jump in their seats. He stood up from his chair in violation of all committee protocol, his face flushed red with what appeared to be genuine rage, his usually perfect hair disheveled from running his hands through it repeatedly during Crocker's testimony. When he spoke, his voice cracked with barely controlled emotion, and spittle flew from his mouth as he shouted. "Congresswoman Crockerr. You sit there with your self-righteous accusations, attacking companies that keep our soldiers safe, undermining our military readiness with your partisan witch hunt. You have no idea what it takes to maintain American military superiority in a world full of threats. You've never served a day in uniform. You've never had to make the hard decisions about national security. And you certainly don't understand the complex relationships necessary to maintain our defense industrial base in an era of global competition." He paused to take a breath, his chest heaving with emotion, his face growing even redder as he continued. "These contractors you're attacking aren't just companies, they're partners in our national defense. They employ millions of Americans. They invest billions in research and development. They maintain the arsenal of democracy that keeps us free. Yes, there might be some excessive costs here and there, but that's the price of readiness, the price of superiority, the price of ensuring that when our soldiers go into battle, they have the best equipment in the world. Your attack on them is an attack on America's military itself, and I won't stand for it." Graham's voice rose even higher as he continued, now walking around his desk to stand in the well of the committee room, gesturing wildly as he spoke. "You want to talk about fraud? Let's talk about the fraud of someone like you, who's never contributed anything to our national defense, who's never risked anything for this country, sitting in judgment of people who've dedicated their lives to keeping America safe. Let's talk about how you're using this committee's time to grandstand for your radical base instead of doing real oversight. Let's talk about your political motivations in attacking an industry that has kept America free for generations." The hearing room was in complete chaos. Committee members were calling for order. Reporters were frantically typing updates on their laptops and phones. Photographers were capturing every moment, and Graham's staff looked panicked at their boss's unprecedented loss of composure. Several senators tried to intervene, with one actually approaching Graham to try to calm him down, but he brushed them off and continued his attack. "I've been in the Senate for 20 years, Graham shouted, his voice now from the volume. "And I've worked with these contractors every single day. I know their executives personally. I've visited their factories. I've seen the pride their workers take in supporting our military. They are honorable people doing essential work under difficult circumstances. They face constant criticism from people like you who don't understand that freedom isn't free, that maintaining military superiority requires investment. And yes, that sometimes involves costs that might seem high to civilians who don't understand the complexities of modern warfare." He turned to address the broader audience, playing to the cameras now, trying to turn his outburst into a political moment. This is what's wrong with Washington today. People who have no experience, no expertise, no understanding of how things really work come in here with their accusations and their documents and try to tear down institutions that have served this country for generations. Well, I'm here to stand up for those institutions, to stand up for the companies that arm our soldiers, and to stand up against this kind of destructive political theater. Graham continued standing in the well, his face now purple with rage, sweat visibly beading on his forehead despite the air conditioning, waiting for Crockerr to wilt under his assault. He had used this tactic before, overwhelming opponents with righteous anger and patriotic rhetoric, making them look small and unpatriotic in comparison. He expected Crockerr to stammer, to backtrack, to apologize for impugning the integrity of defense contractors. Several of his colleagues who had seen him deploy this strategy before watched with anticipation, knowing that Graham's theatrical anger had ended many congressional careers. But Crockerr didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. Instead, she waited for Graham to finish, letting his words hang in the air for a moment, allowing the cameras to capture his red face and heaving chest. Then, with deliberate slowness that commanded attention, she reached into her briefcase and pulled out a single manila folder that she placed on the table with precision. The folder had a red stamp on it that was clearly visible to the cameras, evidence of criminal conspiracy. When she looked up at Graham, her expression was so calm and cold that several observers later said it felt like the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. She adjusted her microphone, ensuring every word would be captured clearly by both the official record and the television cameras broadcasting the hearing live. "Senator Graham," Crockerr said, her words cutting through the chaos with surgical precision, "since you've chosen to attack my credibility and defend these contractors so passionately, even going so far as to claim I don't understand how things really work, I think this committee and the American people deserve to know why you're so invested in protecting them." She opened the folder with theatrical deliberation, pulling out the first document. "This is a bank record from the Palmetto State Financial Group, a South Carolina firm that you claimed was a constituent services organization. It shows $12 million transferred from Lockheed Martin to accounts you control over the last 5 years, disguised as consulting fees for a company that has no employees and no actual business operations." Graham's face went from purple to white so quickly that a medical staff member who was always present during hearings moved closer, concerned he might be having a cardiac event. His mouth opened, but no words came out, just a strangled sound that the microphones picked up clearly. Several senators gasped audibly, and the hearing room fell into complete silence. Crockerr continued, her voice maintaining its deadly calm. "Here's another showing $8 million from Boeing routed through 3 different accounts before reaching accounts in your wife's maiden name. $7 million from Raytheon paid to a consulting firm registered to your beach house address. $6 million from General Dynamics deposited in increments just below reporting requirements. In total, you've received $47 million from the very contractors you're defending. But that's just what we've been able to trace through domestic banks. Here's another set of documents provided by the Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network showing offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, Cyprus, and Switzerland containing an additional $32 million, all traceable to defense contractors through shell companies. You didn't just take campaign contributions, Senator Graham. You took bribes. You sold your vote, your influence, and your integrity to the highest bidder." Crockerr pulled out another set of documents, holding them up so the cameras could clearly see the official markings. "This next set of documents is even more damning. Senator Graham, you attacked me personally, questioning my patriotism and my right to investigate these contractors. So let me respond with something about your version of patriotism. These are communications between you and foreign defense contractors, specifically Russian and Chinese companies, where you provided them with information about American military capabilities in exchange for payments totaling $18 million. You sold them details about weapons systems vulnerabilities, troop deployment patterns, and defense strategies. You didn't just betray American service members for money. You committed espionage." The hearing room erupted into chaos, but Crocker's voice cut through the commotion. She pulled out a recording device and played an audio clip that filled the chamber, Graham's voice unmistakable, discussing strategies to exploit gaps in U.S. military readiness with foreign agents. Your voice, Senator Graham, selling out your country. She stood up, her righteous fury now fully evident. You ask what gives me the right to judge these contractors? The law gives me that right. The Constitution gives me that right. And the blood of American service members killed by equipment you knew was defective gives me that right. This document, she held up a federal arrest warrant, gives me that right. The room went completely silent. Graham's mouth opened, but no sound emerged. His face was gray, his hands trembling, sweat pouring down his face. Security tried to maintain order, but even they seemed awed by the gravity of the moment. This is a setup. These documents are fake. This is a political hit job. Graham stammered, desperation dripping from every word. The deep state is trying to destroy me because I've been effective. Crocker's response was deliberate, precise, and unshakable. Every document I've presented has been verified by federal investigators. The FBI has been building this case for 2 years. Your former chief of staff, Marcus Wheeler, has been cooperating for 8 months. He's provided recordings of you explicitly discussing these bribes. The defense contractors have already been raided this morning while you were sitting here defending them. They're talking, Senator. They're all talking. As if on cue, the doors to the hearing room opened and FBI agents entered, their presence commanding immediate attention. Graham's eyes darted, looking for support, but his colleagues instinctively moved away. Even senators who had once been his allies avoided eye contact. Senator Graham, the lead agent said loudly, you are under arrest for bribery, conspiracy to defraud the United States, and treason. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Graham attempted one last desperate defense. This is a violation of senatorial immunity. You can't arrest me during a legislative session. The lead FBI agent remained unyielding. Senatorial immunity doesn't cover treason, Senator. It doesn't cover taking bribes that resulted in American soldiers' deaths. Your crimes go far beyond anything protected by the Constitution you've betrayed. Cameras captured the iconic image of Lindsey Graham being handcuffed at his Senate desk while Jazmie Crockerr calmly packed up her documents. Photographers captured it from every angle, and within minutes, it was on every major news website worldwide. The contrast between Graham's earlier rage and his current defeated posture told the story in a single frame. The immediate aftermath was seismic. The FBI executed search warrants at Graham's homes in South Carolina and Washington, D.C., his Senate office, and even his country club locker. The amount of material seized required a convoy of trucks. Investigators found a treasure trove of evidence, detailed bribe records, meeting logs, recordings Graham had made for insurance, and documents showing coordination with other officials. Executives from Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Raytheon, and General Dynamics were arrested in coordinated raids, exposing a systemic pattern of overcharging, bribes, and protection. The revelation that defective equipment had killed American service members triggered massive military investigations. Every contract Graham had influenced over his 20-year career was reviewed, identifying over $300 billion in fraudulent charges. Thousands of defective items were replaced, and operational strategies were revised to prevent further harm. Espionage charges revealed that Graham had been providing classified military information to foreign governments for over a decade, affecting national security at every level. Politically, the fallout was immediate and extreme. Every official with defense contractor ties was scrutinized. Donations were returned, stock holdings divested, and 3 other senators were arrested within a week after evidence surfaced of similar schemes. Congressional oversight underwent emergency reform, introducing stricter transparency and severe penalties for conflicts of interest. The trial of Lindsey Graham captivated the nation. Prosecutors presented Graham's Book of Business, meticulously detailing every bribe and meeting. Recordings revealed his callous attitude toward soldiers' deaths, investment strategies using inside information, and a sprawling network controlling military procurement decisions. Marcus Wheeler's testimony provided irrefutable evidence of Graham's corruption, greed, and betrayal. The defense attempted to frame Graham as a patriot making difficult choices, but recordings of him saying, "Patriots don't get rich. I'd rather be rich than patriotic. These soldiers know what they signed up for," collapsed that argument completely. The jury deliberated for only 2 hours, returning guilty verdicts on all 147 charges. Graham was sentenced to life in prison without parole. The judge declared his betrayal one of the most egregious violations of public trust in American history, noting that his crimes directly led to preventable deaths of American soldiers. In the weeks and months that followed, Jazmie Crocker's impact continued to resonate. Congressional reforms accelerated, veterans and families of fallen soldiers received justice, and new policies ensured future accountability. Her meticulous preparation, courage, and calm precision became a blueprint for fearless leadership, inspiring a generation to confront corruption and demand truth. Internationally, allies recognized the restored transparency in U.S. defense oversight. Military strategies were revised, equipment overhauled, and foreign adversaries' access to sensitive information cut off. Jazmie's dedication and integrity became a model for ethical governance worldwide. 1 year later, Jazmie Crockerr stood again on the steps of Congress, addressing a crowd of supporters, veterans, and media. Today is a reminder that no one is above the law, that truth, evidence, and courage can dismantle even the most entrenched corruption. Every citizen, every representative, and every institution must remember, accountability is not optional. It is our responsibility. The crowd erupted in applause, families of fallen soldiers weeping with gratitude, veterans saluting her, and colleagues acknowledging her relentless pursuit of justice. The story of that sweltering July afternoon, of Graham's unmasking, and of decades of corruption collapsing under evidence had become a legend. Jazmie Crocker's name became synonymous with integrity, courage, and fearless accountability. Her legacy was not just political, it was cultural, a beacon for anyone daring to challenge power and demand the truth. She continued her work, mentoring the next generation, scrutinizing contracts, and ensuring that the lessons of history were never forgotten. As the sun set over the Capitol, Jazmie looked toward the horizon, the wind carrying the weight of history and the promise of a new era. She turned to her team and said, "This is just the beginning. We've won battles, but the war for accountability is ongoing. Let's ensure that truth always prevails." And with that, she walked forward, leaving behind a legacy of justice, courage, and unassailable integrity, a beacon for those who dared to challenge power and demand the truth. The world would never forget the name, Jazmie Crockerr.